It's Wednesday, the 6th of July, 2022. Welcome to the Fast Five by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 stories to get through in 5 minutes, and a very big one to kick us off. The Reserve Bank of Australia has lifted the official cash rate to 1.35%. That is up from just 0.1% a couple of months ago.
Yes, and if passed on by lenders, and that's likely, it will add about $200 a month to mortgage repayments on a $750,000 mortgage over 25 years, according to Rate City. By the end of the week, someone with a $750,000 mortgage will be paying about $550 a month more in repayments than they were at the beginning of the year. That's a big chunk of money, and of course comes at a time when petrol and energy prices are sky high. The reason for the rate rises? To curb inflation and get interest rates back to more normal levels. Of course, they were cut hard as the pandemic hit the economy a little over 2 years ago. There's more bad news, Michael. Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe made it clear there are more rate rises in the offing. There is some good news, sort of. The central bank expects inflation to peak later this year and fall back into the 2 to 3% target range after that. That's when the Reserve Bank is likely to stop hiking rates. Also, and significantly, medium-term inflation expectations remain anchored. That's important because if people think prices will settle down, then they're less likely to ask for higher wages. The decision was made after the Reserve Bank board met yesterday. The board believes the Australian economy remains resilient and the labour market strong, but the board said it will watch closely what happens in the household sector.
All right, on to story number 2 now, Sean. New South Wales has declared a natural disaster as rain intensifies and flooding spreads across Sydney.
Yes, throughout yesterday, there were nearly 160 evacuation orders in place affecting tens of thousands of residents. Many thousands of residents are still without power. The severe weather system has now moved north to the Hunter region. The natural disaster declaration in 23 local government areas will allow federal financial aid to flow to flood victims. Now, one thing about the weather, it means that the cost of fruit and veg and fish and meat won't come down as soon as we'd all hoped for. Just like earlier in the year, prices for fresh goods will spike or at least remain high. Supply of fruit and veggies were expected to be back to normal towards the middle of next month. That's now been pushed out. Hardest hit areas around outer Sydney are large growing areas for green vegetables like lettuce, cabbage, bok choy, kale and silver beet. Those prices are going up, unfortunately.
Yeah, not good news. Sean, story number 3, end of financial year time means that we all think a little bit more about superannuation and how much more money we've got for retirement, or perhaps, as the case is this time around, how much less money we now have.
Yes, it hasn't been a good year, particularly given the ASX 200 and bond markets went backwards by 10% and global equities were off much more. A good yardstick of super returns is the Australian Super Balanced option. Aussie Super is the biggest fund in the country, managing about $260 billion. The vast majority of members are in that balanced option. That option ended the year down 2.7%, which I reckon isn't that bad, all things considered. It's only the 5th time since compulsory super began in 1992 that funds have gone backwards for the year. It's the first loss for Aussie Super since the GFC back in 2009. Now, final numbers for the super sector will come out in coming weeks. Keep an eye out for those.
Sean, story number 4, COVID cases across the country remain stubbornly high, unfortunately. And yesterday, the Chief Health Officer of New South Wales, Dr. Kerry Chant, said that people should just disregard anything that was said previously about 2 doses and make sure they get a 3rd jab.
About 1/3 of adults in New South Wales still haven't received a 3rd jab, and more than 1,200 people who weren't up to date with their COVID-19 vaccinations have died in New South Wales so far this year. Dr. Chant said the next coronavirus wave had arrived in Australia and reiterated that while existing vaccines provide excellent protection against severe illness and death, they don't protect against the infection itself.
Sean, final story number 5. On the Fast Five, we're always on the lookout for higher cost of living expenses. And yesterday we actually talked about phone bills rising. We've had petrol prices and energy costs up. But get this, now Domino's has introduced a new delivery surcharge of 6% from Monday to Saturday.
It's getting serious, Michael. The new surcharge sits alongside a 10% surcharge on Sundays, 15% on public holidays and 20% on Christmas Day. According to broker UBS, Domino's introduced a surcharge to offset higher costs of ingredients, staff power and fuel. Now, UBS reckons that about a third of the cost of pizza relates to food, the ingredients, a third to labour and mileage, and the rest royalties, rent, energy and marketing. There you go. Domino's obviously is trying to boost its share price. It's down about 60% since September last year. Maybe surcharges will help investors at least, if not we paying consumers.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 6th of July, 2022. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.